Welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast. Here at QT, our mission is to provide teacher training for tutors. If you are a motivated tutor and you love to learn, the QT podcast will inspire, motivate, and support you to improve your practice. Because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference. Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. I'm delighted to say today we're joined by Vishal, founder of EducateAll, a wonderful online platform that gives tutors the chance to create and sell their own courses on a single platform, bridging the gap between creators, tutors, online content providers. So they provide their own range of material, from online video courses to downloadable revision notes and guides. And finally, they also have these brilliant live sessions with tutors. So they're a very exciting company. Seen a lot of them recently, and delighted to be joined by Vishal. So, Vishal, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Ludo. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
That's quite all right. So how have you been managing in the last weeks and months, Vishal?
So I think all of us who work in the online learning, remote learning, distance learning space were probably taken aback by the way things had moved. I think none of us would have wished something like the coronavirus to be the prompt for the more digital resources in online learning. Yeah. But it is also an opportunity for us to help people, and we're delighted to try and step into that void and help as much as we can with students and their learning.
Yeah, exactly. So what is EducateAll doing at the moment to kind of aid the online learning industry?
So EducateAll is an online learning platform, and the idea there is to make it easy for students to transition between different modes of learning. And so we've got the traditional route of online tutoring, where tutors can be booked through the platform, and they would then teach using whichever online sort of teleconferencing system they prefer to use. So we've got that option. Then we've also got the option for tutors to sort of really expand their business through the other resources they may have. So if they have provided and created other learning resources such as revision notes or practice questions and things like that, they're able to sell those through the site as well. And really, the main area that we like educators to sort of go into is the e-learning side. And this is where educators have pre-recorded videos to teach certain concepts that are aligned to the curriculum and exam board specifications. And the real advantage of something like that is that students get to learn whenever and wherever. They're not really bound by the availability of the tutor. And also their ability to sort of re-watch those videos means that some of these e-learning courses can be quite valuable from a cost perspective as well. They're able to sort of get good value out of them by watching some of those videos. Yeah,
well, I think that's certainly the way that education is going to be heading in the future. Obviously, massively accelerated by the lockdown and by school closure. I think Julia was saying, the founder of QT was saying recently that the lockdown has just accelerated all parts of society. But in terms of education, it's really pushing these kind of forms of e-learning, and platforms like EducateAll, QT hopefully as well, they're really going to benefit from this kind of rapid digitization. So what do you see, if there's kind of one aspect of this, what do you see as the importance of e-learning at this time, but also after schools go back?
So I think it's quite important to bear in mind that this is one way in which students can carry on with their learning. What you don't want is the current situation to hamper the development of students. So this just provides a medium by which they can carry on learning. At the same time, I think it can be something by which schools can improve their resilience. So there may be sort of situations in the future where it may be helpful just to have additional modes of learning. We obviously don't want it to be as a result of sort of emergency conditions like what we have at the moment, but there may be some advantages to just having a system by which you can share resources. A lot of schools do use concepts such as flipped learning, where they get students to do a bit of learning before they come into the classroom.
Yeah.
And you can see that tools such as what we are developing may be helpful in sort of furthering those ambitions.
Yeah, exactly. I think that partnership between schools and online platforms has never been closer. And obviously, as you mentioned, we don't want to be here because of something like this, but schools have been thrust into this. They didn't have a lot of time to prepare. Yes, we had the Easter holidays, which was lucky, but they've been given 3-4 weeks to try and cobble together an online learning curriculum. And that's been really, really tough. So, that's where projects and platforms like EducateAll and like the Oak Academy and Khan Academy have really, really taken off. So we also love to ask this question on the QT podcast. It always elicits such wonderful answers, and also gives such an insight into where the people we're interviewing end up. Yeah. So we had Susanna Hardiman from Action Tutoring on last time, who said that her experiences as a tutor in big sort of West London houses really made her understand that there was inequality in the tutoring industry. So, Vishal, what kind of student were you, and did you ever have a tutor yourself?
So I was quite studious actually when I was younger. My father really stressed the importance of education and sort of instilled some good habits in my sort of learning journey. But at the same time, I did very briefly have a tutor. Just for a few weeks, and that just kind of helped instill some of those habits a bit further. But yeah, quite lucky in the way my father sort of paid a lot of attention to my education and thought to invest at the right points to make sure that I could do well at school.
Yeah, and do you think that even just those few weeks with that tutor, do you think that changed anything about your attitude, your outlook towards working?
I think when you have that experience of getting that one-to-one tutoring, it's a very, very different experience to the classroom experience, right? And I think that kind of just focuses the mind a bit more on the importance of what it is that you're doing, and the fact that someone is there really to care for that specific activity. And I think that just encourages some of those habits of sort of regular learning, just keeping on top of it to sort of really prosper in the long term.
Yeah, and building on that. So you mentioned absolutely the instilling those habits within a student, which maybe they would have worked out anyway, but having that tutor just accelerates that and gives them confidence to work like that. What have you seen in your experiences, Vishal, is the impact of one-to-one tuition?
So I think the ability for the student to ask questions of the tutor, because it's in that sort of small environment, the one-to-one environment is a bit easier to just have the conversation rather than, say, a classroom environment where not the entire lesson, but certainly reasonable chunks of it may be sort of one way, where it's the teacher providing the knowledge and the students are trying to absorb it. The one-to-one environment allows for more of that checking with the student to understand if they've understood a particular concept, and you get that immediate feedback, and so whether you want to move on or not. And I think that kind of dialogue just aids the learning process and makes it a bit more effective.
Yeah, I definitely think that ease of communication that you get in the one-to-one environment just simply cannot be replicated in a school environment. School provides so many other things apart from learning. But if we're talking here about the efficiency of learning, definitely that streamlined one-to-one environment, there's kind of no real rival to it. And actually, given what we're talking about just a couple of moments ago, how do you think that close working relationship that tutors and students have. How do you think that's changed with the kind of huge rise in online tutoring?
So I think the kinds of things that tutors would have been doing before, in terms of managing the students' attention and making sure that they're clear on what it is that's just been covered, that now has an extra sort of hurdle, because sometimes the technology may falter, and that's not a criticism of the technology. It's just one of those things. And if you think about the devices that people may use to access the tuition, there may be other distractions, right? So, for example, if you're using a laptop, you may get certain notifications that may pop up on the screen that just momentarily distract you at the point at which something's being delivered. So I think that's just probably prompted online tutors to take more care of making sure the environment is set up correctly for the learner. Some of that will obviously be in the initial stages of building that relationship, just to make sure that they set up the computer in the right way. But at the same time, I think there's probably that ability to have multiple channels of communication with the tutor. So whereas before it might have been just visit the tutor in person, and then you may not get much from them other than perhaps the odd email. I know of situations now where a lot of tutors, not only are they tutoring through things like Zoom and Skype, but they're also occasionally sending messages through WhatsApp. And that might be just to provide additional support. So, they may set some work to be done before the next session, and the student will go away and start doing it, and then we'll have the odd question, and they'll feel free to just send that message over WhatsApp to the tutor. So the digital environment removes some of the friction you may have had before, actually, bizarrely. And I think that has just made the learning process a bit more fluid.
Yeah. And really going on that same theme, there's a whole load of aspects that a tutor has to change about their online approach, and some of those you've just mentioned about being flexible with communication and understanding technology and being really clear on some of the boundaries of online tutoring, so that you set out early with the student, we're not going to get distracted, you're going to share your screen, you're going to focus much more clearly on what I'm saying. Maybe we'll do shorter, sharper sessions with more breaks, and in order to give the student that time. And there's lots and lots of guidance on this already on the EducateAll website. For anyone listening, there's some really great pages on how to produce online content, how to conduct online sessions. But what are your top tips for tutors starting out in general, but also in this period? If someone's 18, 19-year-old out of university or out of school and is thinking, okay, I would like to become a tutor, I don't really know too much about it, I know that I can enhance online learning, what are your top tips, Vishal?
So I think when you start a career in any sort of profession, you're really seeking to learn more about the craft. You really want to sort of be absorbing as much best practice as you possibly can, so that you can be at the top of your game when it comes to delivering. And so what I would try and do is take advantage of all the training opportunities that are out there. And I think something like a qualified tutor would be very good at sort of delivering some of the content that I think tutors are probably looking for at the moment. I think also the other side of it in relation to tutoring is that it can be an isolated type of profession. So you're often working by yourself directly with the student. And unless you're part of a larger sort of tutoring company, you may not have the opportunities to network. So I think it's always good to try and get involved in some of those networking groups and try and learn from other more experienced tutors. Going on to how you might try and approach the current sort of situation, clearly the social distancing aspects mean that you can't have the face-to-face in-person sessions. We're all on the remote learning path. And that means that you need to sort of upskill yourself on the different platforms that are out there, and making sure that you've got all of the tools and techniques clear in your mind so that you can deliver effective lessons for the students. And that's not just about doing some prep for the session itself, but just going back to some of the technology points. Have you got a backup option if your primary mode of teaching disappears? So if you're using Zoom and it suddenly cuts out because there's X hundred million people using it globally, how are you going to get back online if you've got a second system to get started? If you're teaching, what kind of resources are you going to be sharing online? Are you just going to be giving the face-to-face session? So literally, as you might have a face-to-face call with a family member, is that the form in which you want to teach? Or are you going to be sharing your screen? And if you're going to be sharing your screen, are you going to have prepared some slides beforehand, or are you going to use some digital whiteboards to try and get your points across? So some of those things there about preparing for the session, I think, sort of worth thinking through in a bit more detail now as well.
Yeah, that's several brilliant points. And I was actually going to ask, my next question was going to be how tutors who've already been tutoring for a while, face-to-face, how they make the transition from face-to-face to online tuition. But really, you've absolutely nailed it there. It's not the same. Technology does get disrupted. Delivering online sessions requires you to have much more engaging content. You mentioned there that an online tutor should have slides set up, should have PowerPoints ready, prepared, not as the lesson's starting, but well before. And I think because of the nature of online learning, it is a bit hard to be as formal and as professional on an online tuition class as it is when you're actually turning up at their house. I know even myself, I tutor a lot and have tutored a lot in the past 2 months. Sometimes I can struggle to think that it's as such a kind of formal session, and sometimes you let standards slip when that happens. Obviously, if you were turning up to their house and you were sitting down and the parents were in the next door room or whatever, you'd be prepared for it. And I think that's a really key point for tutors either making the transition from face-to-face to online or who are just starting online, is you have to be doubly as prepared because things will go wrong. So yeah, I'm in total agreement there, Vishal. And actually, we've just talked there about making sure that you have slides, presentations, documents, all there up on your screen. What is your best advice for tutors who want to create their own resources? That's such a key part of EducateAll's philosophy. What is it? What would you say to tutors who are thinking of creating their own material?
I think something like that it's quite a big commitment actually to create resources. I know a lot of tutors who prefer to collaborate with other tutors and they'll share resources between that particular group. But if you want to go down the track of creating your own, you really want to think about whether you're in this for the long haul, because exam boards will change the specifications, and you then have to sort of be flexible around some of those things. And so the kinds of things to consider are, I guess, the time commitment to create those resources, and then just thinking through how you might vary them for different exam boards, and whether you want to sort of make this a commercial proposition. So rather than it being something that you only use for your individual tutoring sessions, would you like to start selling some of these resources? If it is that sort of second commercial approach that you're really looking for in the long term, then things like branding start becoming a lot more important. So having a consistency to your materials. I mentioned the word brand there. You might have a logo that ties in with your company. If you created a personal company for the purpose of tutoring, So there are a number of different factors there to consider, but probably the most important one is actually really how engaging those materials are. What you don't want to do is just create something that's quite dry and doesn't really motivate the learner. The way in which people would have tutored in the past in the in-person sessions, you can always liven up the resources through your own body language, through the way you communicate the material that's being covered. But if it's in the online environment where you're sharing your screen, and perhaps you might have a picture-in-picture mode where there's a webcam that shows you, but it's only in one corner of the screen, it doesn't have the same sort of ratio in a person sort of field of view as the in-person sort of style of delivery would have done.
Yeah. Now, Vishal, I just wanted got last two questions here, but both, I think really, really key to understanding kind of why you enjoy what you do and why you do what you do. So my first question is, why do you think someone should take an online course?
So I would say that the value of an online course is that you can just watch it whenever you want, wherever you want. As long as you've got an internet connected device, you can get access to it. So if you're someone who learns in the middle of the night, then you can always watch the content at that time. Whereas obviously if the alternatives of the in-person or online tuition, you are somewhat constrained by the time that tutor is available. So that's certainly one of the advantages of sort of pre-recorded e-learning content. I also think that the other advantage is that it can be quite cost effective. So one of the reasons why EducateAll came about was this recognition that there is geographic and social immobility, and technology can be like one of the tools by which you can sort of try and level the playing field a bit. So if you can get good quality resources together on one platform, they can be made accessible to anybody, wherever they are. And the ability to watch those lessons again and again actually brings down the cost, shall we say, per time invested in learning that content. So, to give you an example, we have people on the site who sell e-learning courses that have, say, 10 hours worth of content. And they sell those courses for about £60. So, you do a quick calculation, and £6 per hour sounds like a very, very competitive rate, right? Where, the average in the country per hour is about £25 to £30 an hour. So certainly that e-learning can be cheaper in many respects. And then that's just before we even think about rewatching some of that content, right? Which really drives down that per view cost. So I think that there are a number of advantages, and the other side of it, I guess, is you eliminate the traveling time that people may have had before. That can aid people to sort of get back time to do other things in their lives. So that's always valued for people. So yeah, I think the e-learning certainly has a lot of advantages. That's not to say that it's perfect. I think we just talked about some of the in-person methods of teaching or even online tuition. Those are also valuable. And I think that's why our platform was designed to sort of provide multiple modes of learning rather than being solely pre-recorded e-learning content.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that multimodal facet to it gives it such great flexibility and such great reach. I think people are working in entirely different ways these days, so you have to be able to cater for people who want to do pre-recorded, people who want to do live. So I think that you've really reflected that there as well. Must provide both, and I think that's the key to a really successful platform. Now, Vishal, my final question is, just far away in one sentence, what do you enjoy most about what you do?
I would say it's getting the feedback from students and their parents, and that's really important for me to see that impact that we're making on people's lives.
Yeah, that's such a common one, and there's a reason for that. It's so rewarding to hear that, and it's a real clincher to know that what you're doing actually is having some impact. I think that having that self-confidence, building that confidence comes from your own self-confidence, but also from the praise of others. So that's really, really helpful there. Well, Vishal, thank you so much for that. That's a brilliant overview of the online tutoring profession now, what EducateAll are doing to improve that, and what great advice for those tutors listening who want to get into kind of this brilliant, rewarding, dynamic industry. Now, just looking ahead to the next episode, we'll be speaking to Anna Williams Haynes and Harrison from National Orchestra for All, a wonderful charity who combine music and education to support disadvantaged pupils who maybe would never have been involved in the music industry. Anna is head of programs and will be giving us a great overview of what NOFA are doing at the moment to keep up their support for their young mentees. And Harrison is a NOFA ambassador, so we'll be in a great position to give us relatable, personal insight into the motivation that NOFA are inspiring. So that should be really very interesting as well. But thank you once again, Vishal. Thank you for making time for us in your busy day at the moment. Wish you all the very best with EducateAll, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again very, very soon.
Thank you, Ludo. It's a pleasure to join your podcast today. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Not a problem at all. Okay, all the best, Vishal. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. We're always looking for motivated tutors to interview on the show. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, get in touch at podcast@qualifiedtutor.org. We'd love to learn from you.